This podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Legend of the Bones. Following in the footsteps of giants, Legend of the Bones is a chimera. A mix of old-school tabletop RPG and dark fantasy storytelling. As its name might suggest, in Legend of the Bones the dice rule. There'll be no rerolls, no fudging the dice, no metacurrency. The roll of the bones will determine the character's destiny, and no one will be spared their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone. Last time on Legend of the Bones. In the aftermath of the battle with the Ulfhethnar, all of the companions were injured, Valen critically so and close to death. The mage, along with Beric and Arn, had been wounded to such a degree that they were at risk of catching lycanthropy themselves. But fortune proved to be on their side, and the men were each able to avoid contracting the disease. While most of the party rested and prepared to make camp, Beric and Canute took Abron back into the cellars to search for his kidnapped sister, Morwenna. However, fate would prove to be cruel, and in Roscalen's chamber, the three men discovered Morwenna dead by her own hand, apparently in response to the horrific abuses to which she had clearly been subjected to by the outlaw leader. Leaving Abron to his grief, Beric and Canute discovered documents which proved that Roscalen and his men were part of a much larger gang, led by the notorious brigand Elfor Kano. The companions had discovered previously that Kano had been responsible for the attack on the mining settlement of Four Rivers, on the behest of Lord Polmir's steward, a man called Maelor, whom they also knew to be an agent of the Brethren of the Purifying Light. The documents contained orders for Roscalen to harry villages along the River Nade, with the intention of drawing Lord Petroc into sending troops to deal with the threat, leaving him with fewer men to confront the southern rebels when they would eventually cross the Dragonspine Mountains to make war on the king. Chapter 54, Part 1, 5 days ago. Brother Tatwine sweated beneath the thick, heavy folds of his cassock as he hurried along the stone corridor, his boots tapping sharply against the cold flagstones, their rhythm steady but desperate. The weight of his journey hung heavy on his shoulders. He was tired, utterly exhausted, and his body felt stiff and sore from the days of constant travel. More than anything, he longed for a bath, to cleanse the grime that clung to him, and for the comfort of a soft bed, free from the stiffness of a saddle. He had ridden for many days, pushing himself beyond his limits at the command of his tutor, a man whose expectations were as relentless as the road itself. Yet his tutor's words echoed in his mind, reminding him that his task was of paramount importance to the Brethren, and moreover, it was in the service of the Nine. As the door to the Chapel of Light drew nearer, a surge of guilt rose within him. He had momentarily yearned for the comforts of mortal life. A bath, a soft bed, even the touch of a woman. It was sinful, he reminded himself. A desire that ran counter to the vows he had sworn. His tutor would not have been merciful. He would have urged Tatwine to repent and castigate himself until he felt the full weight of his imperfections. But that would have to wait. His mind already turning to the task at hand. Pushing open the heavy oak door, Tatwine stepped into the space. The chapel was modest but elegant, a quiet sanctuary of calm and reverence, away from the temple's main church. Rows of well-worn pews stretched down a short nave towards an altar bathed in soft, filtered light. Above it, a magnificent stained glass window dominated the room. A circular design, as was customary, depicting the blessed sun, though the glass itself was cut into hundreds of coloured pieces. Even on this overcast morning, the delicate pieces of glass caught what little sunlight had managed to break through the clouds, casting a soft kaleidoscope of hues across the stone walls and floor, which was at odds with the coolness of the room. A solitary figure stood before the window, the man's bald head gleaming faintly in the dim light, his back straight and his posture unyielding as he faced the glass. He was of medium build, wearing a tunic of lye-bleached linen, belted neatly at the waist, and woolen breeches of muted grey. His simple attire spoke of a man who had little use for frivolities, just as his stillness suggested someone deeply engrossed in contemplation. As Tatwine stepped into the room, the man did not turn to greet him. The silence stretched, filling the space like a tangible presence. Tatwine swallowed hard, his throat dry. This was the head of his order, yet a man he had never met. With some hesitation, he took a step forward.
"Brother Reynard?"
he inquired nervously, upon which the bald man finally looked around, revealing a hawkish, middle-aged face with deep-set, narrow eyes, framed by thick, dark eyebrows and a wide mouth.
"Yes."
His voice was flat, almost emotionless, with just a hint of irritation. Tatwine, trying to steady his nerves, cleared his throat. The weight of his mission bore down on him, and the words felt heavy on his tongue.
I come from Porthcullen."
He fumbled at his cassock, his fingers shaking slightly as he retrieved the rolled parchment. His hand extended towards Reynard, offering the message as though it weighed more than a simple scroll.
"With a message from Brother Jon."
Without a word, Reynard reached out and took the parchment. His fingers brushed against the novitiate's briefly, and Tatwine felt a coldness in the touch that seemed to match the chill of the chapel. Reynard broke the seal with a swift motion and unfurled the letter, his eyes skimming the words with an intensity that made Tatwine feel as though he was being measured, judged. As Reynard's eyes hardened, Tatwine felt a knot of anxiety coil in his stomach. His breath hitched in his chest as he saw the subtle shift in the other man's demeanour, a tightening of the jaw, a flicker of something dark behind his cold gaze. Tatwine had only recently joined the ranks of the Brethren. He had always been devout, his faith unwavering for as long as he could remember, and being accepted into the Church of the Nine had been the fulfilment of a lifelong dream. He recalled how, along with another novitiate, a woman called Jenna, he had been assigned to Brother Jon's tutelage. Jenna was beautiful, radiant even, with her raven-black hair and infectious laughter, and Tatwine had watched her from the shadows, consumed by desire for a woman who had never once looked at him. Over time, lust turned to bitterness, and bitterness to hate. He found himself wishing her dead. So when Jenna was sent away, something twisted inside Tatwine. A deep sense of satisfaction had followed her departure, a sense that her absence was not just a relief, but a victory. Jon had confided in him that Jenna, like all women, was a sinner, who flaunted herself like a common whore. Jon had told Tatwine then that he was a member of a devout order, the Brethren of the Purifying Light, which practiced the true, literal teachings of the Holy Scriptures, that the pious must forgo earthly pleasures, that women bear the sin of men's lust, and that sorcery, and those that practice it, are an aberration. Jon's words had spoken to Tatwine, and gave meaning to that which festered in his soul.
"You bring ill news, Tatwine,"
Reynard lamented, though the novitiate was more surprised at the use of his name. He supposed Jon had mentioned it in his letter.
"Your fellow student, the woman called Jenna,"
Tatwine bristled at the name,
"has fallen in with a warlock and a group of heretics to murder my most loyal friend, Adric, and may have stolen an artifact of great worth."
Tatwine's eyes widened in shock.
"I'm sorry, brother."
Reynard shot the novitiate a glance.
"Be not," Her sin is not yours.
The cleric's remonstration faded quickly, his tone softening to a chord as he looked back at the parchment.
My spies have reported that they now travel by river towards the Dragonspine Mountains. The question is, why?
He looked back at Tatwine.
But come,
he said, moving to put an arm on the young man's shoulder, guiding him gently out of the chapel.
The time for planning is past. Now we must act. And you, my young friend, you shall help me.
The fight with the Ulfhethnar left the companions badly injured, so I decided that they would stay in Lostwithel for a few days while they rest and recover. And during this time, the crew of the Uvadraka would help the villagers begin to rebuild. Whilst this is a loss of valuable time, as a player, I want my characters to be back at full health in case another encounter happens again soon. I rolled miracle and spell checks off Mike, and determined that the party would remain in the village for 3 days. So on day 55, the companions continue on their journey to Varfell, at the foot of the Dragonspine Mountains. Varfell is around 50 miles upstream, so at best the journey will take another day and a half. Let's find out what it has in store. Day 55. Weather. 13. Warm and dry. Wind direction. 6. Southwesterly. Okay, so the crew will need to row. Stumble upon. A 7. Nothing. Wandering encounter. A 3. No encounter. Day 56. Weather. 16. Yet another warm and fine day. Wind direction. 4. Southeasterly. Again, the crew will need to row. Stumble upon. 10. Nothing. Wandering encounter. A 5. No encounter. Okay, so the journey is uneventful. But given what happened in Lostwithel, I'm going to ask the Oracle if Varfell has been attacked by forces loyal to or in the employ of the rebels. A 3. That's a no but. Okay, I think that's enough for now. Let's get back to the narrative. Chapter 54. Part 2. Day 56. Late morning. Party status. Beric, 43 out of 43 hit points. Lena, 31 out of 31 hit points. Valen, 19 out of 19 hit points. Talion, 27 out of 27 hit points. Canute, 36 out of 36 hit points. Spells available. Valen has memorized Push, Shield, Soothe, Revive, Clairvoyance, and Ignite. Talion has memorized Resolve, Poetic Prose, Pitch, Imbue, and Lullaby. Lena can pray for 2 first-level miracles, 2 second-level miracles, 1 third-level miracle, and 1 fourth-level miracle. Bright sunlight sparkled like molten gold and glistened off the ripples in the water as the Uvadraka sliced gracefully upstream. Despite the looming shadow of the ancient forest of Coosquills, the fine weather cast a warm, hopeful glow, lifting the spirits of all on board as the ship wound its way through the serpentine curves of the River Nade. For 3 days the companions had little choice but to rest and recover their strength in Lostwithel. And during this time, the Uvadraka's crew had worked with the locals to clear away the debris of the burnt-out buildings and lay the first timbers for a renewed village. With the help of nearly 40 extra pairs of hands, the folk of Lostwithel had made remarkable progress, raising the framework of a new hall for their village. Yet armed with the knowledge uncovered in the outlaw lair, and their wounds now healed, the companions knew that they could tarry there no longer. The previous day's travel had proven uneventful, a welcome lull in their otherwise relentless trials. But now, as their journey's end came into sight, a quiet tension settled among them, heavy with unspoken apprehension about what they might find. Valen sat near the prow, deep in thought. Since encountering Amos in the Chamber of the Ancestors, he had been contemplating that which he had learnt, and had begun to wrestle with doubts about their current course of action. What would happen if they managed to find Amelza at Pen Malkine? She must already be aware of the Brethren seeking the Eye of Krevik. After all, she had been warned of the threat by Amos, and had taken steps to elude the fanatics by leaving Angrak. At the same time, had Demelza and her unknown apprentice succumbed to the corrupting whispers of the jewel's insidious power. Valen now recognised all too well how the Eye of Mordgren had affected him during his time as Amos's apprentice. Regardless, would the companions really try to take the Hellstone from her? Surely that would make them no different than the Brethren. At what price might they pay with their own souls? Might the better course be to travel to Innis Maitan to discover the secret of how Derwin defeated Vortigern? Perhaps this could yield a clue as to how to destroy the Hellstones. Why had Amos veiled his answers in mystery, leaving the path so uncertain? He gazed out at the passing trees, hoping to find solace in nature's savage beauty. The clarity he sought eluded him, tangled like brambles in his mind. A male blackbird fluttered down from a nearby tree and perched upon the side of the ship.
What did you not tell me, Amos?
The mage addressed the bird. It cocked his head, its bright eyes glinting with an almost knowing curiosity, then sang a short, sweet refrain before taking flight. Valen smiled wryly.
Keep your secrets then.
Midday came and went, and by mid-afternoon the majestic mountains of the Dragonspine came into view above the tree line, their jagged peaks stark against the endless azure sky. The highest summits still wore their crowns of winter snow, gleaming like silver in the sunlight. "It's breathtaking," Lena exclaimed, staring with wonder at the panorama. The cleric had never seen mountains before.
Yes, it is a view to behold.
Valen's voice was soft and distant, then added ruefully,
It reminds me of Clanwys.
Lena slipped her hand into his in a silent gesture of comfort. The mage looked at her and smiled.
But being with you is home.
Shortly, the Uvadraka rounded another bend, and the tree line began to thin with obvious signs of felling, revealing fields of still green wheat and barley. In the distance, the wooden palisade of a settlement emerged, its sharp stakes rising defiantly against the landscape. It was not long before it became clear that Varfell was no mere village, but a sizable town that spanned the river, its wharves bustling with activity, which seemed strange given that the Uvadraka had passed no other vessel along the way. Canute had handed the helm over to Ravin, and he and Beric now joined the others at the prow. The dragon's head had been stowed earlier in anticipation of reaching Varfell, and the Conwind banner now fluttered in the breeze from the mast. The Northman stood up on the prow, his feet planted on either side of the ship's hull, his arm clinging to the carved spiral which had replaced the dragon's head.
Those fortifications look new.
He called back, observing how many of the palisade's timbers were fresh, showing little sign of being weather-worn. Canute looked around, his eyes meeting Beric's.
They're preparing for war!
Other than deciding that Varfell would be a town rather than a village, I have no preconceived idea about the settlement. The earlier oracle roll gave me the idea that the town was in the process of being fortified, which makes sense given that it sits near the border with Lord Polmir's lands, and suggests that there may have been some signs of potential threat. In addition, with its proximity to the Dragonspine Mountains, it makes sense that the town's main industry is mining, which in turn may make it a tempting target for attack. Given its size, economic importance and strategic location, it would seem reasonable that a reeve or thane represents Lord Petroc's interests in the area. Given that Varfell is at the very limit of Petroc's domain, I think a thane is more likely. To give me an idea about their personality, off mic I'm going to use the excellent Une NPC generator to give me some prompts as to what they are like. Back in a minute. Okay, so Une has told me that the thane is a subtle man who persecutes lies, administers allies, and compels the poor. I can work with that. Next, I'm going to make a reaction roll to see how the thane might feel about these newcomers. As Canute is oathbound to Lord Conwyn, he will speak for the party initially, so I will apply his +1 charisma bonus. Rolling 2d6, higher is better. A modified 11. Okay, that's possibly friendly. One more roll to make certain. A 9. That's definitely friendly. Now I think that the circumstances of Canute's oath to Lord Conwyn must be quite widely known, so that result makes some sense. Even so, I wonder what it is to make him so welcoming to strangers. Let's see if the mythic event meaning chart can prompt some light. Action first. 22. Befriend. Well, that is fitting. Now the subject. 86. Hope. Befriend Hope. Okay, well that seems fairly straightforward. Finally, I want to ask the Oracle if the Thane or any of the townsfolk can provide any information about the mage, Demelza, and the place called Penmelkine. A 5. That's a straight yes. Okay then. Chapter 54, Part 3, Day 56, Afternoon. Party status. The party status is unchanged. By the time the Uverdraka passed through the towering watergate, a sizable throng had gathered along the wharves, eager for a glimpse of the newcomers. Among the crowd, some faces looked on with suspicion, but the majority wore expressions of anticipation, curiosity, and hope. The town that stretched out before them rivaled that of Healthstone in size, with clusters of low buildings tightly packed within the protective bounds of a wooden palisade. Near the river's edge, 2 sizable barges were docked, their hulls gently rocking with the rhythm of the current. The absence of activity around them was striking, a sharp contrast to the lively scene unfolding on the shore. Raven expertly manoeuvred the Uverdraka towards a vacant wharf, and as the vessel came closer, the companions' eyes were drawn to a group of warriors, housecarls, led by a figure of noble stature, watching with an air of quiet authority. The leader was a man in the prime of his years, perhaps in his early 30s. His medium-length brown hair was tousled by the breeze, and his flowing moustache framed a pair of piercing eyes. Like his warriors, he was dressed for battle, his sand-polished mail glinting brightly in the light of the afternoon. Over his armour, he wore a fine woolen cloak of crimson that fluttered slightly with the wind, and was pinned with a gleaming gold brooch in the shape of intricate swirling patterns, while about his neck hung a similarly decorated gold torque. His gaze was steady and unreadable as the Uverdraka slid into its dock. The companions could feel his eyes upon them, an impassive scrutiny that gave nothing away. When the ship came to rest and they disembarked, he took a step forward, his movements deliberate and measured.
Hail!
His voice rang out with an air of formality, though there was a certain reserve to the greeting, a guarded warmth rather than a fully open welcome.
I am Teuoc ap Tudor, Lord of Varfell.
His words carried authority, whilst his eyes remained watchful, sizing up the newcomers.
Who comes bearing the banner of House Conwyn, and on what business?
Canute, as the companions had agreed, stepped forward. The Northman's voice was firm, clear, and respectful as he addressed the nobleman.
I am Canute Haraldson, my lord. Oathman to Lord Conwyn. These are my companions, Beric, Lena, Valen, and Tolian.
With a slight gesture, Canute motioned to each of his companions in turn.
As for our business, that is a matter best spoken in private. But suffice to say, we come as friends in dark times.
There was a brief moment of silence before Teuoc's lips spread in a slight smile, and he nodded his head appreciatively at Canute's discretion.
Well met!
He responded, for the first time with genuine warmth.
I know your reputation, Lord Canute. It is one of honor.
Teuoc gestured welcome with open arms.
Come then, to my hall, where we may speak plainly. And in the meantime, Neot here will arrange accommodation for your crew.
The companions were led through the crowd, their path winding and twisting through the heart of the town, past houses, stalls, and workshops. The streets, caked in the dust of daily life, were alive with activity. The rhythmic ring of blacksmiths' hammers striking iron echoed through the air, blending with the steady sound of timber being sawed and nailed as men laboured on the construction of the town's defences. The everyday hum of folk carrying out their business, traders calling their wares, the laughter of goodwives, mingled with the distant clatter of carts on uneven roads. Pigs snuffled through the mud, while chickens pecked and fluttered freely among the crowd, occasionally chased by a dog. Children, their faces smeared with dirt and excitement, ran through the streets, brandishing sticks as crude swords, and mimicking heroic battles in noisy games of war. As the companions ventured deeper, the cluttered buildings gave way to a more open space. The road became cobbled, and wound towards a stout wooden gatehouse at the heart of the settlement. Beyond it, the street opened into a wide courtyard, where, at its centre, stood an impressive mead hall. The structure was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, its thick timbers carved with intricate patterns of interlacing knotwork and swirling designs. The interior of the hall was just as impressive. 2 long feasting tables ran down either side of a central hearth, where a servant was clearing the ashes from the previous night. The companions' eyes were naturally drawn towards a raised dais at the far end of the room, upon which were set 2 wooden thrones, their surfaces intricately carved with ancient runes. Long banners, rich in colour depicting a white wyvern on a blood-red field, hung either side, their edges swaying slightly in the draughts. Teuoc commanded the servant to cease her work and bring ale for his guests, and with a gesture invited them to sit and share their tale. Detecting no duplicity in the Thane's demeanour, and sensing he was a man who valued honesty, the companions relayed everything that had transpired since the shipwreck, revealing what they knew of the Brethren's treacherous plans. Finally, when they reached the grim events in Lost Withel, Teuoc sat forward in his chair, his brow furrowing as Beric described the brutal, unrestrained violence that the village had been subjected to. His expression darkened further at the news of the rebels' plan.
This is grave news indeed,
the Thane declared, his voice heavy with concern.
A month ago,
he began, his voice lowering as though recalling a memory.
An emissary arrived from the traitor, Polmiar, promising me greater lands if I were to break with Lord Petroc and give my allegiance to his lord.
Who was that man, my lord? Beric asked, his tone respectful, yet laden with curiosity.
His steward, Maelor, that you spoke of in your tale.
Teuoc's voice carried a bitter edge.
I refused, of course. I am no oathbreaker. But shortly after, we saw a surge in brigand activity.
Teuoc's expression soured, a visible trace of frustration in his eyes.
Several farms and hamlets at the edge of my domain were razed to the ground. It would seem that Lostwithdale is the latest.
The Thane's gaze grew determined with resolve.
It is why I have commanded a strengthening of Varfell's defences.
Beric opened his mouth to speak, but Teuoc anticipated the question.
I tried to send word to Lord Petroc, of course, but shortly after, each time, the messenger's head was found outside the town gates. It is why I cannot risk sending our barges down the river. They will surely be attacked.
The Thane paused, his eyes flickering towards Canute with an almost pleading look.
But perhaps a ship full of Skarnier warriors can succeed where others have not.
Alas, we cannot, my lord. Beric responded respectfully on Canute's behalf, his voice firm yet regretful. Our errand cannot wait. We must find the mage Demalza, lest the Hellstone in her keeping fall into the hands of the brethren.
No, cousin.
Canute interjected softly, his voice laced with something unreadable. Beric turned to the Northman in surprise. What do you mean? The Skarne sighed heavily, as though the burden of what he was about to say weighed deeply upon him.
You must go on without me.
Beric shook his head in confusion, his voice stuttering with disbelief. I don't understand.
We know the rebels will outnumber the king. Conwyn and Petroc are loyal, but the men alone will be too few. They need allies.
Canute's gaze locked with his cousin's, his resolve clear in his eyes.
So I must find Ainur. I must find your father.
Thank you for listening to Legend of the Bones. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you like what you've heard, then please consider rating and reviewing the show in your podcatcher of choice. Not only do I love seeing the feedback, but it really does help the show reach new listeners. As always, where would I be without my amazing cast of voice talent? A newcomer to the show, playing Brother Tatwine, is Matt Boothman. Matt is the creator and GM of Merely Roleplayers, an improvised ensemble audio drama featuring members of Blackshaw, a London theatre company. Another newcomer, playing the role of Lord Teuoc, is Carl White. Carl is the host of the excellent Lone Adventurer podcast, which is firmly on my list of essential listening. If you like what I do here, then you should definitely check out Carl's show. And finally, returning once again in the role of Canute, is Jon Cohen, creator of Tale of the Manticore. My sincere thanks to all of you for your support. As always, I am incredibly grateful. I'll put these wonderful folks' links in the show notes. You could also help by liking or reposting new episode announcements, or by recommending the show online or to a friend. You really can't beat the power of word of mouth. Alternatively, if you would like to show your appreciation by buying me a metaphorical cup of tea, then I have a Ko-fi page at ko-fi.com/Legend of the Bones. Any donations will go towards the show's running costs. If you're interested, I also have a range of merchandise, which can be found at redbubble.com/people/legendbones/shop. To keep the cost down to you, all items are presented at zero markup. I make no money from them. It's purely to give something back to fans of the show. I would also love to know what you think of the show, and I do respond to every message I receive. So with that in mind, you can contact me on X at LegendBones, Blue Sky at LegendBones, Mastodon at LegendBones at ttrpg-hangout.social, Instagram at LegendOfTheBones, email at legendofthebones@gmail.com, or go to legendofthebones.blogspot.com for show notes, house rules, character profiles, art, maps and more. Join me next time to find out what awaits our adventurers as the bones decide their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone.
Life's a game, the world's a stage, and we're merely role players. Now playing in the main house, Vigil.
It's true. My department has abandoned this town and left you to fend for yourselves against your worst nightmares. But I promise I'm not going anywhere, and I'm asking you to join me. Your neighbours never need to wake up and remember their nightmares, because we'll be there, keeping watch.
Vigil. A Merely Roleplayers production. Search for Merely Roleplayers wherever you find podcasts. Maximum drama guaranteed.